several clergy in Russia.
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Kaliningrad.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of Global Atheist News Review, the show where we give our opinions on the news. And I have a panel of opinionated people to help me. We have Scott Wiegold from California. We have Guy Otten from Manchester, in Northern England. Tersia du Plessis in South Africa. Frank Lovell in Kentucky, and Dr. Ty Wells in...
Back by popular demand. Everybody kept saying I look so good with the shirt on. I said, all right, I might as well just go get it on.
In Tennessee.
I don't actually remember anybody asking for it.
I think everybody was. They were like, Tyrone, you're so good looking with it. I was just like, okay, fine, I'll go get it.
It was an unspoken subconscious wish.
Yeah. I'm here to please the public. What can
Absolutely.
I say?
And you're doing it. So thank you very much for joining in, guys. This wouldn't be much of a show without you. So, dropping straight into item number one. Somalia, that's in the Horn of West Africa, as it used to be called. And the capital is Mogadishu, where there used to be a Hyatt hotel. Unfortunately, it's pretty much been razed to the ground, if that's not a contradiction of terms. It's largely been destroyed, to put it in an understandable way, by assailants who used explosives to gain entry and violently took control. And the Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab has taken responsibility for this. 117 people have been injured, 15 of them critically, and 21 are confirmed dead. The ordeal took 30 hours. So what do you think of that, guys?
What was their reason for doing that?
I've little idea. All I know is there's some disagreement going on between the government in Somalia and these Islamist militants.
Yeah, I mean it's a civil war power struggle, isn't it? And I think Al-Shabaab, in fact, control parts of the country.
Yes, I think they do. Yes. Welcome,
Hello,
Dave.
Hello. Sorry to be late to the dance.
No worries. I don't know whether you heard what we're talking about now. It's Somalia, where the Hyatt Hotel has been destroyed by Islamist militants of Al-Shabaab.
Oh.
And lots of deaths, injuries.
So the trouble is in certain societies, well, it particularly in the Middle East and also in many African countries, and that is, I think, why the framers of the United States, when they drew up the Constitution, made a separation between church and state. Because what's happening in places like Somalia is that there is such a integration of religion and politics that it becomes almost impossible to distinguish the two, and that makes the complex situation even more complicated, because now you not only have to deal with ages of tribalism and the effects of colonialism, you also have to deal with religion in between and different factions of moderate and more conservative. So to quote, was it Hitchens? Religion just, if it doesn't ruin everything, it at least complicates it.
Yeah.
I think he said religion poisons everything, doesn't he?
Poisons everything. That's right. That's right.
It's an additional ingredient to the entire mess, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well,
Anyone
if you
else
want to make things complicated or more complicated, then all you have to do is add an ingredient of my God is better than your God.
Yes.
And then what will follow will inevitably be some form of violence and victimization of one group against another.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, I think what's going on in Somalia is an Islamist attempt to take over the government, which is more secular or more moderate, as it were, in Islamic terms. I think there's the same God on both sides, but there's theological differences. And Al Shabaab are into clerical autocracy, just like ISIS. I think they're linked to ISIS
Yes.
and Al Qaeda and places. Yeah.
And all those things, yeah. And in this case, it's even worse than your God is better than my God, because I'm of the opinion that the idea of my version of our God is better than your version is sometimes even dangerous, because you will get Muslims and even Christians who are more forgiving towards people of the other faith than they are of people of the same faith who are seen as heretics or having a different view of the same God. And with Al-Shabaab and ISIS and even the Taliban, I mean, those are all, I think if one digs deep enough, they're all different factions of the same type of extremist Islam. Beliefs.
You were quoting. I'm sorry.
Sorry, David.
Oh, no, I was just saying you were quoting Hitchens earlier. I think Hitchens also had a line about, isn't it fascinating how the most radical or interpretation of God just happens to meet the most radical version that you personally believe if you're a radical. Or I'm paraphrasing there, but it just seems to be that whatever your God agrees to happens to be what you believe. So even if you're of the same sect, you're praying wrong, or your theology is wrong, or there's something wrong with your religious philosophy, even if you pray to the same God.
So a power struggle, isn't it, at root?
Yeah.
We're coming on to that later on too in the show, because it's a case of splintering into sub-cults until you can find a few people who agree that your version of God is the correct one. He agrees with us.
Right. Exactly. And we all know God is Donald Trump, so.
If he declassifies anything, it's declassified because he said so.
Right. Even if he admits he didn't have it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
That doesn't really make logical sense.
No.
I think it's unfair on God to say that Donald Trump is God.
I've insulted God.
This is blasphemy of the worst sort. Okay. Well,
I had a quick comment. Is that cool?
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Ty.
So, as the best dressed person on this show today, I wanted to throw out we'd agree that the gods that they believe may not have a good reason for belief in them, but the pain that they cause by their believers is real. And a lot of times that the people who are victims of this belief system, it's as real to them when they see the destruction that caused to them, the loss of life, the loss of family. And the best way they can get back at them is by returning the favor in the name of their own God. And so a lot of what we're seeing, like when I hear like these news of like these religious conflicts, it's almost on the same order of gang warfare. It's on the same order of just I need to get you back. And it's not even about the God. It's just about you hurt me. And what's the easiest way for me to hurt you back? And that's this visceral cycle of destruction that we're getting caught up in. Blamed on religion, but the hurt was still there even if they all became atheists the next day.
Do you think if we could direct their energies to an online game, my God versus your God, with joysticks and things, do you think that would be an improvement?
I don't think it would have the same effect.
I think they're on the trajectory. If you remember the original Star Trek of Beale and Loki, the one was half black on one side and one was half black on the other, and they wanted to just do nothing but annihilate each other for the purpose of revenge,
Mm.
even though they were quite literally the same. And what was Gene Roddenberry saying about what we do to each other on our own planet?
Yeah.
Frank Gorshin's greatest appearance.
That's right. Yeah, right. Exactly.
I'm
Better
a
than
big,
the Riddler on Batman, but I digress.
I'm a big fan of Roddenberry. He had the right idea.
Yeah.
Moving on, we're going to Iran. And you may have heard about the Baha'i community. They're the largest religious minority in Iran. And the faith began, it's a monotheistic religion that emerged from Islam in Persia in the 19th century. There's a founder, he was imprisoned and exiled. And cutting a long story short, the mainstream Muslims insist that he wasn't a prophet, and the Baha'is think he was a prophet that superseded Muhammad. So they're not happy with each other. And what's happened recently is the government of Iran, who want a success at the moment because the country's in pretty dire straits, and this is the Tehran government. They want something to distract attention from the deteriorating situation of their nation. So what they've done is they've attacked a village, Rushanku, in Mazandaran province. And they've destroyed about 6 homes. 200 Iranian agents went in, destroyed the homes, confiscated over 20 hectares of land, and arrested more than 100 Baha'is. So there you go. There's something else to talk about.
Well, I mean, their persecution of Baha'is is not new. It's been going on for a very long time, and huge numbers of them have fled Iran. And there's quite a large community in the Greater Manchester area of Baha'is, of whom probably about half are Iranian refugees or were. So I think we benefit from their presence because they're although they are religious, they are a very moderate universalist bunch who are very open to ideas and participation, by different belief systems.
Yes. I believe their belief system has taken the best bits of lots of other religions.
I think so. Yeah. It's definitely an improvement on Islam, anyway.
Guy, I want to respond. Having recently visited Manchester and other parts of the UK as well, what struck me when I had conversations at a very big car boot sale that's held in York. So many of the people who sold stuff out of the boots of their cars had very harsh comments about people that come to the UK, fugitives and refugees and people who come from other parts of the world to the UK. And I know that it's a common narrative in the United States as well. And something that I've said this before, and I'll have to continue saying it until we realize that if what happens in Iran has an impact on people who live in Manchester when they are suddenly confronted with an influx of refugees. And if we don't recognize that we have to improve the way people see the world and we have to get people in touch with reality, then these types of things will just keep on happening. And then we haven't even addressed something like climate change and how people think about that. It's just, I don't know how long we will continue to forget that the world is, we are not on an island.
No.
The world is multi-ethnic. Yes. Well, it's always the case, isn't it? In America, too. I'm going to ask Frank about this because I think he lives in one of these parts that I'm just about to talk about. When immigrants arrive, they go to the cities because, they're cosmopolitan. They're going to meet people of their own type. And in the more rural areas, I don't know where you were in York, but I know that parts of York are still quite pure ethnically. Is that a word? And so they retain their old attitudes of, the ye olde Englandy that you might see in Miss Marple movies. And this is also true in the more rural parts of America. So can you tell us something about what it's like where you are, Frank? Do you have immigrants?
Well, yeah, it's like that you just described here. The cities are pretty cosmopolitan, and rural areas of Kentucky are other phobic generally, and Kentucky's a very Republican state. Not this city of Louisville. We're largely a Democratic city, but and I suspect it's similar in Tennessee. Ty can address that.
Oh yeah. And there's really there's 5 major big cities in Tennessee, and more people from other states, because of how state taxes work in US, are coming to Tennessee. And it's causing a lot of these big center cities to have an influx of people who, don't have the rural lifestyle, have different kinds of ideas, different religions, different cultures, different languages. And it's a culture shock to a lot of people. And I'm coming from California, so when I see people like look around like, oh, this is different, I see that kind of as a good thing. If anything, the main motto that I've always had is that bad ideas sink and good ideas tend to float to the top. And so when you have like these diverse perspectives in one spot, things tend to rapidly improve towards more progressive attitudes, better lifestyle, more empathy, better legislation, better representation, all sorts of stuff. This is a good thing.
Yeah. So do we want to stir people up more, mix them? Scott, what do you think?
Well, yes. I mean, ultimately, being around people from every sort of difference, whatever it might be, whether it's skin color or religion or national background, absolutely. The more that people mix, especially in childhood, the more tolerant the society becomes. Here in Southern California, we actually have one of the largest centers of relocation of refugees coming across the southern border. And so people who've applied for asylum are sent to a center in a very suburban part, not urban, not really rural, suburban part of Southern California. And there are periodically large protests outside of that center. Because, of course, from there, the people are often bussed out to all sorts of other places, various towns in sort of all over the Western United States. And so I find, Southern California is overall about as easygoing of a large section of the United States as you're going to see. And yet we absolutely do have this kind of hyper-nationalist, other phobic element here in Southern California.
Yeah. Well, I remember speaking to a Californian comedian who he's an atheist and he does anti-God jokes. And I said, well, I suppose you can get away with that in California, but, other parts of the states, you might not be very well received. And he said, well, I've only got to go 50 miles in from the coast. And it's hillbilly country. And I still do it. I go there because I want people to see that I'm a normal guy, just doing atheist jokes. There's nothing, I don't eat babies, there's nothing nasty about me. Yeah.
Well, then I'm not going. If he's not eating babies, I'm not paying for a ticket.
Right. I mean, babies are delicious. Let's face it.
So what are we going to do to get over this? Get off my land, attitude.
Get off my land.
Yeah. Just keep working on the diversity. I mean, frankly, I mean, if you look at the last election, at least in the United States, no one thought Georgia would turn blue, right? Not only did they sweep the Senate, but they also went for Biden. So when you talk about the historical nature of demographics, even in the United States, in terms of movement of people, it's people moving from the East and the West Coast who are moving inland, who are creating this change. And we know that if you look at what demographers have been saying for 25 years, is that by 2050, the United States is going to be a minority majority country, and that no one particular group is going to have an ethnic group, at least, is going to have an ultimate. In other words, we'll all have skin in the game. It doesn't necessarily mean things will be equal, but to a lot of people, what they're seeing is like this is the last grasp of an ethnic group that has held all the cards for 100 years or 150 or 200 years in the United States, and seeing their numbers whittle and seeing their power go down as well.
If I can add something positive as a South African and as a white South African, we don't often have positive. Well, I don't often say anything positive, but I can remember that when I was Hanu's age and my son is 15, and there was no chance that I would have mixed with a person of color, not because I didn't want to, or at least not on a basis. But now, because of a variety of factors within one generation, my son, none of my children have any problem with people of color, not to mention people who speak different languages. And most people my age who grew up in a highly segregated society also honestly have no problem with people of color, which is the most obvious difference, especially in South Africa. So once integration happens, it actually happens quite quickly and with surprisingly little violence if we just let people do what people do, which is socialize. And I do think that social media, that the younger people involved, like TikTok, makes it so commonplace to see people who look and sound completely different that it's not so funny to meet people in real life who look and sound completely different to you and your group. So that's some positive perspective that I hope I can give.
I hope you're right. We could be looking at the demise of the WASPs, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants.
One last point, as the most machismo person on the show for today. It's not so much diversity and spreading out and being exposed to new different kinds of people is important, but the underlying theme of that is education. And it's education in a different sense, not in a scholastic sense where you're sitting down in a classroom, but in the idea that you're looking at different kinds of people, you're understanding how they operate, you're understanding how to make friends with them, and realizing that the exposure of your background to other people's backgrounds puts you in better contrast to what's good, what isn't good, and what you need to cut out in order to be a better person in society. A lot of people who don't have that opportunity end up in the simplest sense, never growing. They've reached a state of arrested development where they think their ideas are the best and they can't evolve as a person, particularly when the world is evolving around them. And that's a problem. But when you are exposed to other people, you have an opportunity to learn new things and learn how new people operate. And I think that's the key to it. And when we saw Georgia turn blue, gerrymandering is a terrible thing in the US. That's been going on for a long time, but it has limitations in that people thought if I just do this degree of gerrymandering, I can keep and suppress the votes of the progressives out by a certain margin. But every year there's more and more larger populations of kids graduating, more and more population of college graduates of different colors and different diversities. And it's that giant influx of new ideas, particularly after the boiling point of the last 4 years of Trump, where people realize this is my opportunity to speak up, and I've been waiting 4 years to be able to do that. Now I have a vote. We are the largest voting new bloc of just educated young people willing to make a difference, and gerrymandering couldn't keep up with that. And that's why we saw Georgia turn blue. It should have turned blue 20 years ago. And same thing could be said for Texas. Same thing could be said for, maybe I'll give it to Kentucky. Tennessee still has a bit of a ways to go. But like, I think if you were to look at just the trajectory of the world, it is one where it's going to have to be learned to be inclusive, whether it's kicking or streaming, or just by exercising empathy. And I think that's the path that we should go.
Well, I'm not used to having this much optimism this early in the show, I'm afraid.
Dr. Ty, it's Dr. Ty. It's that look. It's just that bright yellow gizmo. It just makes us all upbeat, eh?
Just swelling up with energy. There you go. Let's go. Let's go out and do some push-ups after this. How about that?
If only we can get the young people to vote.
Yeah.
Or keep voting, if anything.
Yeah.
Moving on. We are going to the US now. We're going to Baton Rouge in Louisiana, where a lady called Nancy Davis started to feel ill, and she wondered whether she had COVID or flu, but then she took a pregnancy test and she got 2 blue lines. So she ran to tell her boyfriend, excited, and they went to get the ultrasound at the Women's Hospital, which is the largest birthing center in Louisiana. This should be Louisiana, shouldn't it? The technician looked troubled, and a woman in a white coat came into the room. And the doctor pointed to the picture at the top of the head. There was no skull. She told Davis this was an unsurvivable condition. Well, of course, the poor woman was distraught, heartbroken. There was nothing more she would have preferred than to have had the baby. But instead, she had to prepare herself to pay an estimated $5,000 for an abortion at the hospital. Unfortunately, even after the doctors at the hospital said they would provide an abortion once she got the diagnosis of acrania, a rare and fatal condition, from a specialist, the hospital called to tell her they wouldn't be able to do it. They sent her to a Florida abortion clinic instead, or said she had to carry the baby to term. This is because acrania does not appear on the state's ignorant list, that's my ignorant, of accepted conditions for abortion. So I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, she's going. I gather she's going to get the abortion in Florida. Is that right?
Is she?
Yeah. I don't. That's a question. There is, if not Florida, somewhere else. There are states where she can still do that.
Yeah.
And I'd be happy to donate some money to get her there.
Really?
Imagine unnecessary cost that she now costs on top of the emotional anguish.
Yes.
The additional emotional cost. And, we don't realize, but traveling is expensive, it's uncomfortable, and a long journey like she might have to take, it just adds to the stress, and so it's completely unnecessary. But on the topic of abortion, what I just remembered again this week when I saw that episode about the Louisiana women. I know a lady who contracted German measles during the first 3 months of her first pregnancy. And even though at that time abortion was illegal in South Africa, the doctors did an abortion because there was enough of a risk that the child would be severely
disabled. Yes.
Yes, and an unsurvivable pregnancy would occur. So the abortion was done. Subsequently, one of the lady's subsequent children has mental deficiencies, and that woman feels guilty to this very day. She's convinced that she's she was punished by eventually having a child with mental deficiencies because she had that abortion done at that time. So the emotional anguish that people have to go through because of guilt over something that is completely guilty about just breaks my heart.
Yeah. Well, this is a spin-off of the Roe versus Wade overturning, isn't it? And there will be more, unfortunately.
And it's a great example of the sadism of religion. I mean, really, the terrible emotional and physical stress is placed on people in the name of God.
Yeah. Nonsense. Yeah.
I'll throw one quick thing.
Yeah, sure.
I also feel like I feel like we have a right to privacy that while not as encoded as our other rights, but should be commonsensically due to someone who's making sensitive and as personal choices what this lady just went through. And for her to not only not have the opportunity to keep that a private matter, but for it to be like an article in the news and then expect it to travel to what is very much a conservative state, you know, it's where Trump's located. It's like, okay, so now we have a pregnant woman on a timeline going to a red state. All of this is now out of her head. Is she going to be safe when she's traveling? Now, does she have to? Can she just get a ticket on a bus and get there, or is this going to need to be a thing where she needs to have a publicist with her or security with her? Like, how much additional fanfare are we going to apply and put more undue stress on her? And I feel like this could have been avoided if it was just like, you know what, you have a right to privacy, you have a right to your own body, whatever. We'll take care of it. We can do that here. I mean, how easy would that have been?
Absolutely.
Right. Well, I'm sorry I stepped away. I had to actually, ironically, help my daughter.
Is she all right?
Yeah, no, she's fine. She's fine. What this is, and someone might have already made this point, is that this whole pro-life movement is not really a pro-life movement; it's an anti-woman movement.
Yeah.
And the reality is that all these draconian, very religious laws about what a woman can and cannot do with her body are all about religious doctrine and taking away a woman's right to her, as Ty said, her privacy, her body, and we need to be very aware of this in the next election cycle because this was 40 years in the making.
Yeah.
You know, this is no surprise.
A warning to our friends in the UK. For the first time since I've been watching anything on YouTube, last night there was an advertisement, a very long, very professionally made. I actually watched the whole thing because I wanted to see what it was about. An advertisement that was shot in the United Kingdom about a pressure group in the United Kingdom that pushes the pro-life agenda. Very professionally done. Obviously, there's a lot of money being invested. So don't rest in peace, gentlemen and ladies of the United Kingdom, because it struck me that I've been watching YouTube for 10 years and I've never seen such an advertisement. And now suddenly this came up on my profile. So
well, about I don't know, 5 years ago, maybe more, a colleague and I at the Worthing Skeptics in the Pub organization, which we ran back then, took on some pro-lifers back then. So we had a debate with them, and one of the audience members was a woman who'd had an abortion. So it was very pertinent. Anyway, I think we won the debate. Now, this is one for you, Scott, because every so often we get some study or other that tries to link religious fundamentalism with mental disease. And this latest one says that findings suggest that this is published in the Neuropsychologia. Findings suggest that damage to a particular area of the prefrontal cortex indirectly promotes religious fundamentalism by diminishing cognitive flexibility and openness. That apparently is a psychology term that describes a personality trait which involves dimensions like curiosity, creativity, and open-mindedness. Now, I don't know whether you've come across this particular research study, but would you like to say something about it, Scott?
Well, we're not really talking about mental disease, but about simply a tendency toward a type of thinking. So I don't want people to start proclaiming that this indicates that religion is a mental disease. Now, I think that argument can actually be made, but I don't think this research makes that claim and should not be used to try and make that argument. However, there's no doubt that certain kinds of brain damage, certainly more global types of brain damage, tend to lead to more concrete thinking. Concrete thinking being the sort of presumption or underlying tendency to presume that things are one way, and an inability to see the gray areas, an inability to consider changing your conclusions, etc. And in this case, talking about openness and flexibility certainly is in that same realm. The prefrontal cortex is primarily where we make judgments, where we make decisions about what's going to be best for us, what's going to be best for our family, what's going to be best for our group, all of those kinds of judgments. Being able to predict the consequences, riding down a steep, bumpy mountain trail on your bicycle, and being able to predict that there's a pretty good chance I'm going to be thrown off and it's going to be a hard landing, and maybe this is part of the trail where I should wear my helmet. Those kinds of judgments are prefrontal cortex, and this is in particular why adolescents, late adolescents, the 16 to 25, that age range, because of course biology doesn't care that the legal standard for adulthood is 18.
No.
Our prefrontal cortex doesn't fully develop, doesn't finish developing until somewhere around 23 to 25 years old. And you see exactly...
In females.
Okay. Beg your pardon?
I said in females.
I believe in females, it's actually a couple years younger.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. In females, but in some males, it never happens.
Wow.
Yeah, well, okay, we'll go with that. But the thing is, we're talking about dogma here, aren't we?
Right.
And this article goes on to say that religious beliefs can be thought of as socially transmitted mental representations that consist of supernatural events and entities assumed to be real. And they differ from empirical beliefs, which are based on how the world appears to be and are updated as new evidence accumulates or when new theories with better predictive power emerge. But the religious beliefs are not usually updated in response to new evidence or scientific explanations, and strongly associated with conservatism, fixed and rigid, promote coherence to the rules of society, and they generally oppose anything that questions or challenges their beliefs or way of life. And for that reason, they're often aggressive towards anyone who doesn't share their specific set of beliefs and towards science, as these things are seen as existential threats to their entire worldview.
Right. All true, and those same traits do not even have to be religious. We certainly have people who are maybe barely religious, maybe identify as part of a religious group, but they don't participate in any way, shape, or form, and they have only a very vague idea of what their own identified religion means, but who behave in this same way to anything that challenges their preconceived ideas.
Yeah, dogma again. Yeah.
I'd like to make a quick point as the person with the most well-developed frontal cortex on the show. We tend to generalize. We tend to generalize both as like great, it just as what human beings tend to do. And when news like this comes out, I just want to remind anyone that I used to be religious. A lot of people used to be religious as they come into atheism. And in my opinion, I think it is the case that, and I don't have data to back this up, but I do believe that this is the case. The majority of people who are religious can easily become not religious through some intervention or through education or through some acknowledgement that the reasons that they believe it are tied to their environment or their social structure or how they value themselves. There are billions of people, though, and I guarantee you that there are people who may have some sort of proclivity in their mind to be more eager to adopt dogma. But I do feel like the majority of people who are in that state can be reached out to, can be, taught the values of critical thinking. What I find is that they're just not given that opportunity, that they're developed in a society or in a culture or in a town, a block even, or a family that doesn't allow them to have those opportunities. And that is the nature of what makes religion so innocuous. It's just that you give really brilliant potential minds and you cover them up and never give them the opportunity to flourish or bloom in the way that they're supposed to. I think if we gave them that, if we lend more opportunities for children to be able to foster their higher thinking capabilities, we wouldn't have to do studies like this in the first place.
I'm going to challenge you on one aspect of that. You said easily educated.
Yeah.
I don't think it's easy. And in these cases, these dogmatic people don't offer themselves willingly to be educated.
So it's a good thing that you bring that up, because my whole YouTube channel is showing that in as easy as a 20-minute conversation, you can have these conversations. I have found, and listen, it sounds crazy because we don't have very good examples of it, or at least popular examples, because we're used to seeing people debate where they automatically have an opponent that they're fighting against, or we've seen people be chastised for the beliefs that they have in front of a willing audience willing to listen to one side or the other. What we've not really had is conversations with people about why they arrived at their conclusions. If they are genuinely curious about trying to believe what they believe for the best reasons, that is a person that can be reached to in the most easiest 5-minute conversation in your life. If you don't believe it, check out my YouTube channel. It's what I've done for the last 3 years. Just had conversations at protest rallies, in churches, and at schools, colleges. You can talk to people who are religiously conservative. You can talk to people who believe they saw UFOs, people who believe their bodies turn into light. And as simple as 3 questions, you can get them to realize, I don't have a good reason to believe that. Let me come back to you. I'll think about that a bit better. And a lot of them do. It's a useful way to approach people who are very dogmatic in their views with just genuine questioning about their methodologies. It is possible, it is easy, and you can do it too.
Ty's channel is called Let's Chat, and he does videos of street epistemology or the Socratic method.
Well, this is a human problem, because the one thing you didn't have to worry about if you were a Neanderthal is the frontal region.
And I would like to support what Ty said, because I was myself not too long ago one of the most dogmatic believers of the faith that I grew up in. I think I've told on this channel how I had a fight with my former fiance about doctrine. I was extremely dogmatic. So now I'm just dogmatic about critical thinking, which is much better, I think. But meet people where they're at without without being condescending about something like intelligence. We've had the discussion on a thread on Facebook about intelligence. So I appreciate research like this, and I think it needs to be looked at and looked into, but with the correct attitude, definitely. Because the biggest mistake one can make in shutting down any conversation is calling the other person stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're such a cuddly bunny now. It's difficult to imagine that you were ever anything else, Tersia.
Of course.
So, moving on, I'm going to do 3 short items now. Is it 4? Because we've overrun our time already. Northern Ireland, there's a museum which is biological or paleontological. It's got dinosaurs and things in it. And some creationist has demanded a revelation of its basis for evolution. You know, it's one of these freedom of information requests that anyone can submit now. And so he's said, unless they release information about their stance on the evolution of life, air quotes, there could be a legal case. So the Ulster Museum is biting his nails. So watch that space.
I don't think they'll have any problem with that. But
Right.
I don't think so either.
No, I mean, you have, fortunately in the UK, unlike in the US, you have an incredible adoption of natural selection as reality, as scientific evidence. It's not even a theory, but as a law. And that is incredibly valuable. In fact, last time I was in the UK, I went to the British Museum, and one of the startling differences between your natural history when it deals with human evolution is that it's not fancy. It's very factual, but there's no bells and whistles. There's no slides. There's nothing for the kids to play with. If you come to the United States and to, let's say, the Museum of Natural History or even the National Museum of Science in Washington, D.C., it looks very different. You have to make it warmer, more cuddly to make it acceptable. And I saw that as, and I think it's because of the acceptance rate in the U.S., which is now 52%, thank goodness. But I don't think you have anything to worry about.
Good. Right. Pleased to hear that. Meanwhile, going to the US.
I would suggest burying them in the documentation.
Yeah, and that would be so easy to do. It would.
Yes, because Frank has a friend here who is the chief antagonist of the Creation Museum and Noah's Ark, the Ark Encounter. Which is, I'm trying to get him to come on our show, and I still haven't succeeded, Frank. But we'll keep plugging away at it.
Yeah, I'm not giving up. I don't know what the problem is, but we'll fix it.
Great. So, witches. You know, since COVID has become milder, the witches and pagans have begun to gather again and do their cavorting in the open air. And
cool.
Yes, Unfortunately, so have the street preachers and Christian protesters who like to go along to try and distract and deter people from enjoying their pursuits. Apparently, this year, there were 30 evangelists this year, being quite aggressive and even dangerous because they oppose witchcraft and paganism. Takes all
talking about witchcraft and paganism, I had a very interesting week. So I have some new students, and they come straight from the public school system. And I was amazed that they are fascinated. Well, I wasn't amazed that they were fascinated, but I was stunned of the extent to which they believe that there is such a thing as witchcraft and that one can actually cast spells. The only way I could think of convincing them that casting spells and crystals and using crystals and chanting and candles and things like that, they're absolutely convinced that it's possible to have an effect on reality by doing that. And the only way I could devise to convince them otherwise was to devise a spell with rocks that I picked up on Otten Beach, John.
Ooh.
And I bring some fragrant candles, and I cast a spell that would help them to learn their multiplication tables. And that when that didn't have any effect, they actually considered the possibility that, well, if that doesn't work, then maybe casting a spell on somebody that harmed you in some way might not work either. But I was absolutely stunned that they are so immersed in these beliefs, and these are two totally different children coming from two totally different backgrounds, but they were in the same public school. And apparently TikTok is rife with this kind of thing. And what I found, what really worries me, is that in South Africa in particular, and I think in certain schools in the United States, it's the same. You cannot impart critical thinking skills and make children think that casting spells with crystals won't work when they are taught every single day that praying to a physical person will have an effect on reality. And somebody like me is not allowed to enter schools. I'm not allowed to interact with children in schools. So at the same time, they get their gospel from TikTok, and the ideas behind the gospel is being reinforced by preachers and teachers who pray and read the Bible and chant incantations over them in school. So
well, all you've shown, I'm afraid, is that the rocks from Otten Beach don't work.
Well, yes, I was going to say, John, that I fear the take-home message that some of these young people will take home is that you're not a very good witch.
Yes.
Well, we discussed it, and then one of the solutions was the candles have to come from America. So I don't know where in America one can buy special incantation candles, but I was told that my candles weren't good enough. And also I didn't use the right words to cast the spell. But then I said, okay, so where can I find the right words? And it was, I think I did achieve something though, because they did begin to think about how do crystals and how do incantations then have an effect in reality.
Thinking's good.
Now, what in the world would you have done if the spell increased their motivation and caused them to study and learn multiplication tables?
Yeah.
This seemed like a very dangerous experiment.
Yeah.
I would have sold my method, Scott. I would have sold my method, and I would have had something to invest in my offshore bank account.
And then you would have had a protest from the other side of Otten Beach saying their stones are more powerful. That's right.
I'd sign up to be able to just learn things through incantation rather than actual traditional studying any day.
Yeah.
Any day.
And there are people who will take your money, Ty.
Yes.
Hey, listen, plug me in. I'm ready for the Matrix.
Okay, Guy, next Sunday before we start, 4:00.
Moving on, in parts of the US, we've got Oklahoma, a guy who he's a candidate for the Republican primary, Scott-esque. And unfortunately, some years ago, he justified the death penalty by stoning for gay people. And like everything else on the internet, it's still there. So this is hurting his application to become a contender for the seat in the state house. I guess that's a local Oklahoma Senate house. And he's regretting what he said back then.
It's a gift to his opponent.
Yes. He's trying to backpedal it and not doing very well, I'm afraid, because he still wants to appeal to the Bible group in Oklahoma. You would, wouldn't you? So he doesn't want to say that what the Bible says about a long list of people who sinned, who should be worthy of death. He doesn't want doesn't want to retract on that because he'd lose the Christian vote.
Here, oh, go on ahead,
David.
I got a comment on this. If straight people from Oklahoma really dislike gay people that much, they should stop making them.
I mean, but the point about this proposal or this idea is, of course, it comes straight out of some religious text, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah.
And that's the problem. That this religious rubbish, well, it's not just rubbish; it's dangerous because if a public figure says this is a good idea, the next minute someone will try and do it.
Yes.
And the day after that, they'll be throwing them off the top of buildings, and
right.
The public will take on the law into their own hands. They think that they're endorsed.
And yesterday, I was very pleased to march in the Manchester Pride Parade in the UK. We had a bunch of humanists, and it was a massive parade. We were group number 164, and there were over 200 groups and floats and things. Good. And the public that lined the streets were really receptive. They cheered us and they clapped, and there was noise and high fives and all that kind of stuff. It was a great parade. And, it really shows that sexual orientation equality has arrived in the mainstream. But that doesn't mean to say the battle is over because of these kind of things.
It gives a whole new meaning to the phrase Manchester
United. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, Manchester United is not doing very well at the moment. So perhaps we can take the word and, give it a new meaning.
Exactly.
My own personal opinion is that 100 or 200 people ought to take him at his word and show up to his rallies with pockets full of stones and ask him to prove that he is not wearing mixed fabrics.
I like it. Yeah,
absolutely. Yes. And we can
Will
provide
you sell them the beards?
I will personally provide the stones. Staying with the states, a law in Texas that was passed in 2021 requires public schools to display the sign "In God We Trust" as a poster, as long as they've been donated or paid for by outside groups. So there's no taxpayer money involved, and as long as they fulfill the law's requirements. So conservative Christians are already taking advantage of this. They're printing posters, offering them to schools in various counties and districts of Texas. But one atheist, a guy called Chaz Stevens from Florida, has noticed that the law never said "In God We Trust" had to be in English. So he's had a load of posters printed with "In God We Trust" written in Arabic.
Yeah.
And he sent them to, or he was intending to send them to Texas schools. And the question is, will they accept these donated posters? But for them, the problem is they don't have a choice, because if the posters are donated and they meet the legal specifications, they must be displayed.
Genius.
So watch that space.
Brilliant.
Sounds like a Dread Pirate move. Where is that guy?
Yes, that's right. It's a pirate move. We're missing him today.
Yeah.
I think I must do something like that in South Africa, because there's a. Are you guys familiar with the Gideons?
Yes.
They hand out Bibles they place Bibles. So in South Africa, the Gideons they adopt a school and they hand out Bibles to every single learner. And so maybe I should get some funding and print a few human particular booklets about critical thinking skills and go and hand those out, and put up a little bit of a stink if they don't allow me, and say, well, you can't bar me from handing out my booklets if the Gideons can hand out their Bibles, and try that stunt. Maybe I must do that.
Okay, well, going down under, you remember last week we talked about the new Diocese of the Southern Cross that split off from the Anglican Church of Australia. Well, they've come back. The Anglican Church head, Primate Geoffrey Smith, is now saying, you're not part of us. You're really a new denomination. You can't call yourself a diocese of the Anglican Church. So that's going even harder, that little disagreement. I thought you'd like to know that.
Oh, I think it's a brilliant move that's going to backfire on them, because if you can trademark, if you're going to make a legal argument that this is an infringement of trademark, then every sect of Christianity can be sued by every other sect of Christianity for trademark.
Yes.
That's a delicious thought.
I love it. Yes, yes. So to finish off, we've got a couple of items of good or humorous news. Singapore has repealed the law that banned gay sex. It's a bit late, but you know, they've done it. And so the gay people are congratulating and are very happy. A hard-won victory and a triumph of love over fear.
You still can't put chewing gum on the sidewalk, but they're getting there.
Finally,
I'm not sure if that's a really good exercise of freedom to encourage.
no. Finally, there's a north of Johannesburg. I guess this is near Pretoria somewhere. You should hear about this, Tersia. There was the founder of the Miracle Center, a guy called Pastor Siva Moodley, who got ill last year and died on the 15th of August, but his body has been kept at the funeral home because his family is awaiting his resurrection.
I presume they didn't embody him, or do the chemical substitutes. So is he hermetically sealed or what? I mean,
no, Frank, he's taking up in a mortuary freezer, and the poor guy that runs the mortuary is getting exasperated because there's actually now the owner of the mortuary has, if I'm not mistaken, he's actually filed to get this guy buried because he's taking up space.
Yes.
And he's not resurrecting, and the family insists that he will resurrect. But there's also a little thing about money because the congregation still are also being told that he will resurrect, and the family is still running the church. So sweet story, this.
Yeah, he's like a bed blocker, isn't he? In hospital.
Yes.
Anyway,
they can buy themselves a freezer and put him in there.
Yes, home freezer. Yes, why not? Anyway, guys, you've been brilliant, and I thank you for being part of this event. And we've overrun, but never mind. We've enjoyed it, I hope.
Yes.
So say goodbye, and I'll play the outro. Thank you.
guys.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Several clergy
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Carry Moon drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that guy?